And perfect, we are good to go. Welcome everyone to this online event hosted by Conscious Capitalism Bay Area here in the San Francisco area of the United States. And I say that because one of the things that these online events allow us to do is literally have people on the call joining us from all over the world. And we're thrilled that we've had people joining us from literally conscious capitalism chapters in countries all over the world. And today, especially because we have an international presenter who is joining us. And again, want to welcome everyone. My name is Robert McPhee. I am the events chair for our Conscious Capitalism Bay Area chapter, and I will be your host today. Mostly what I'll be doing is introducing our presenter and then handing it off to her to share some incredibly interesting information and perspective with all of us. And then I'll be working with her towards the end of the call to facilitate some Q&A. So as you're listening, just know that we are going to have some time at the end for questions and answers from those of you who are on the live call. And also want to just welcome those of you who are listening to the recording and encourage you to keep an eye on when we're doing these online events. And please join us in person for one of the events in the future. So again, this is part of a series of online events that we've been doing here with our Conscious Capitalism Bay Area chapter. It's a way for us to share information and provide value for our members here in the Bay Area. And again, one of the things we love about it is it allows us to expand the conversation about the four tenets of conscious capitalism, even beyond the Bay Area. And part of the focus as we've been getting started with these is an issue that is very much in the forefront for us here in the Bay Area. And we find that it's in the forefront for a lot of the businesses that we're working with and affiliated with. And that is the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And finding ways, one, for within our own organization, our own chapter of the International Conscious Capitalism Movement, and also for the organizations that we work with and work for, to find ways to do better in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you look at the archives of the events we've done so far, you'll see a couple already that have focused in on this issue. And this one that we're doing today will again focus on this issue. So we're thrilled today to have a guest from literally across the planet. Like literally, if I were to take a line and draw it from where I am in beautiful Sonoma, California, all the way to the exact opposite side of the planet, I'd probably come pretty close to where our guest, Ann Miles, is. She's in Australia. And I'm going to read a little bit to you about what she does and off of her bio, and I'll share a little bit of my personal experience because I've had the opportunity to connect with her several times leading up to this event. So let me tell you a little bit about just her formal bio, and then again, something personal before we hand it off to her. Ann is a unique, multi-talented advertising and marketing professional and is the founder and managing director of International Creative Services. She is a problem solver, with some calling her the marketing police, always looking out for the best solution, ethical, and with the brand's best interest in mind. Her experience begins as the head of TV in many large multinational advertising agencies. She's also the foundation owner of Exit Films Australia, a senior producer at Fuel VFX, as well as holding freelance roles in many fields of production, including motion design, digital and graphic design, and animation. Her experience has also expanded to the client side of marketing in terms of a research company and also producing integrated campaigns. Ann is also a qualified business coach and has studied further in neuro-linguistics and principles of psychology to understand why people do what they do. And then this next sentence to me really hits the nail on the head as far as why we're here today. She has a very special passion for diversity in the way we work and the work we produce, as well as the unconscious bias that comes through in the creative execution. Finally, at the very bottom of her bio, there's a line that says awards, and it just says too many award-winning campaigns to remember, which I love. She has a sense of humor, which is good too. So then on a personal note, I would just wanted to share, again, she and I have had a chance to connect a couple of times in getting ready for this. And what I've learned is that she has a very unique perspective on this whole topic of unconscious bias. And being in the marketing world, it gives her the perspective that I've seen of, first of all, she sees how this unconscious bias shows up. She sees the environments that we're surrounded by where this unconscious bias shows up, but she also understands where it comes from. Like she understands how important it is to understand where it comes from. And that's a lot of what she's going to talk about today. And then also she brings in the perspective, which is how we both connected, which is that she's very active with a conscious capitalism chapter in Australia. And she brings this shared commitment to the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism, which to me means she not only has an awareness of this unconscious bias and how it shows up all around us, but she also has a real commitment to doing something about it. So Anne, welcome. We are thrilled to have you here today. And hopefully I didn't go on and on and on and on too long talking about how fabulous you are. Oh, I've got you muted. That's not going to help us very much, is it? Now you're unmuted, so you're good to go.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much for a lovely introduction. So it's sort of a bit embarrassing sometimes. You go, oh my God, all these things I've done. Wow. It's partly, there's a reason for this as well. Being a woman in marketing and advertising from the 80s up to now, this is grey hair, I have had a lot of experiences where there was just no way up. And so I had to go sideways to get my stretch through the industry. So I feel like that's a bit of motivation as to why I'm doing this topic. So thank you. It is a little bit of a different perspective because I think a lot of people focus on diversity and inclusion topics. It's generally either operational or human resources. And I'm feeling like no one's paying attention to the end result that we put out there in the world. So this is helpful for marketing people, but I also think it's really important for business owners to understand, what the impact of their teams and business marketing can have on the world. But also this applies to just even an email that you might write, or even if you don't have hands-on experience with marketing, it's also how you can judge what you see and have a voice and stand up when you see something that is, not right. So I think even though it might be a topic that seems specific to marketing, I think it has such a broader scope. So if you could look at it with the whole gamut, that would be awesome. So what I should probably do is just share the screen and...
this is where we get to test our technology. We got it.
We got it? Everyone good?
Love it when that happens.
So I've called this Bringing Humanity into a Serious Business. And in this instance, I've got some examples of social media framework, and I'm showing you how you can do social media marketing without unconscious bias in it. What happens a lot for businesses when they're trying to be professional and grown up and all very important, what they end up doing a lot of times is becoming very masculine. So I'm really keen to break that habit and show an alternative. So and I really appreciate that, Robert, you said what you did. I'm very much over everyone just talking about this whole problem, but I need to be really like on the ground. We're actually doing something. So my whole business model is designed to resolve this problem in how we recruit and how we produce the work. And just for clarity, I have changed the name of the company recently because of a trademark problem. So it's not International Creative Services anymore. That's like what I deliver, but the company's called Suits and Sneakers now. So that's what the logo's about. So that's suits for the strategists and account service people, and the sneakers are the creatives and production. So in marketing, it's a little bit of an insult for the strategists and account service people. We call them the suits. So that's the inside joke there. Okay, so firstly, I'm hoping this is going to skip. Oh, I've just had to figure it out. Okay, cool. So Robert's talked about this, so I won't really bore you, but you can see I've had this diverse background and also doing all sorts of specific topics. So I'm a constant learner, as you can probably figure out, and this is my pet topic. So I am really grateful to be able to share it today. So thank you. So I was saying that I had this experience of just being never being able to get past the glass ceiling, and so even in some jobs I'd be having in a training program, and the trainer would come into my boss and go, "I've got the best person ever for you as your next CEO." And the managing director would be like, "Oh, who? How exciting!" And then the trainer would say, "Anne Miles," and the boss would go, "Oh, well, she's a woman, so yeah, we're an automotive-led agency, so sorry, that's not going to work." And I'd go, "Okay, I'm out of here, move." So I kept moving. And then it's funny because, there comes a time in advertising and marketing as well when, if you hit 40, you just, they think you're no longer creative, and that's just ridiculous. But anyway, so I've had all these sorts of things happen, and I just got to a day where I went, right, that's it. I'm going to do something about this. And I also had another interesting perspective as well. I was over the dinner table with my children one night, and they're fighting away, and as children do, and one says to the other, "Oh, you're so gay." And I'm going, and hey, in this house, we don't talk like that. I said, "If anyone's gay in this house, it's you." Then my young one says, "I'm not actually gay, Mum. I know what I am. I'm non-binary transgender." And in my head, I go, "What the hell is that?" And then out loud, I said, "So tell me more about that," and had to learn very fast. So that's really brought a really interesting perspective to what gender neutral looks like as well. So that's flavoured a bit of what I talk about here today as well. So this here is the map. So down the bottom on the left, we've got our individual unconscious wiring. So there's a lot of us, that are actually completely unaware of things that are ingrained in us, and the beliefs we have formed through family, through our friendship groups, society in general, media, everywhere. So we behave in certain ways we just don't even know that we are. Then there comes a time when you start to be conscious of the things that you don't know, and you think, "Oh, I think I need to learn something here," or someone pulls you up and says, "That's not how you do it, now." And as having a transgender child, I've had a lot of that going on for the last 5 years. And then what happens is it gets impacted when you're in a team, and this is, in a workplace. So this, whatever is ingrained in our thinking, when it gets in the collective, it gets bigger, and then everyone just validates and reinforces it. Then it starts to hit the hiring and supply chain, it gets bigger again. And then at the other end, to me, this is the real problem area, is it starts to come out in the communications we do. So that'll be whether that's the creative work. It's actually also technology, artificial intelligence, that is as well, and also our choices in media as well. So I feel like it just starts to get into a really big problem, hits a consumer, and then each consumer has a bigger impact. So one little person's problem, can really impact the whole of the society at large. So I'm going, how do we get back to this take responsibility here point, become conscious of what we're doing and make change? So then it's like, how do we? So I've been pulling that apart. I'm going to talk today about gender specifically, but I want to be really certain and explain, because a lot of people think that diversity is just about putting women in a few jobs, and it's absolutely not to me. So for me, diversity is sex and gender identity, its abilities and life stages, its socioeconomics as well. That's like really misunderstood, and especially in Australia, the data on the Australian Bureau of Statistics says the average wage is a certain amount, but because the people with income are 11 times more wealthy than the people who don't, it's actually really skewing the results. So we really misunderstand what the real average person looks like in Australia in marketing. It's race and culture, which is probably a little more obvious. and it's also urban and rural differences as well. So I was brought up in the country, and then I had to, manage going into the city and having all that like bias there. And then now that I'm in the city, going back to the country, there's more bias back. It's like really interesting. And in marketing, we're missing the mark because there are differences between the two. Sexuality, which is different than gender identity as well. And then the other one is probably more things like that Robert would be aware of, but personality type, thinking type, neurodiversity. They're how we think are actually all quite different. And so there are ways you can talk to all personality types to be inclusive of that as well. And with disabilities, in Australia anyway, 25% of people with disabilities actually have a psychosocial disability. So that has an impact on how we communicate to people. So it sort of isn't what we think it is. So I go to a lot of, around in the whole marketing world and, even business in general. And this really reflects, I think, what people think. So they go 83% of marketers in APAC, that's the Australian and broader region, believe their organisations are creating advertising that avoids gender stereotypes. So if that's the case, then why do I feel like I've got to have a voice about this? And that's because 63% of consumers disagree. So we're really messing up. And I think we've really got to sort something out with this. This is actually a global study by Kantar, which is a big research company. This is really, really robust data. And I'm going, this shows us we've got a really big problem. And looking here too at consumer behaviour, women are actually responsible for 85% of all purchases. And if you look at other sources, it can say up to 91%. So you can see the sources where this has come from. There's so much of it, but I just picked one that I thought demonstrated a few trends together across categories, but there's so much data available that says this. So you can see in food, 93% are women, healthcare, 80%, automotive, 65% for new cars. If you add used cars, it goes up. Investment banking, 89%. So a lot of these industries actually typically think that it's actually the males that are making the decision. So they're creating creative work that is designed for this. So I think there's another point that I also want to be clear. Look, I am a women's advocate, but equally, I really think I'm egalitarian. So if you look at this data right now, the fact that there's such a skew to females making these decisions, that's a diversity problem in itself. And I call this diversity oversteer. So we've overcompensated and now women are doing too much. So we're not actually, as a society, encouraging or allowing men to step up into these, or expecting them to step up into these shared roles. Because if you reflect across the population of our country, Australia in particular, it's nearly 50-50 male-female. So really, if we were gender balanced here, the shopping would be shared 50-50 across the household. So we've got a bit of a job to do. At the same time, even though women are the main decision makers, you look at across all categories, 91% of them feel misunderstood by marketers. And in each category, it's overwhelmingly misunderstood. So we're doing something really wrong with our communications. And I think a lot of times when businesses are trying to be professional and grown up, they slip into the mode of being too masculine, and so it doesn't resonate with women. So the problem is then, if you look at how men and women, and I say that as a trend, I'm not saying every man and every woman, but as a trend, there is enough scientific or social study data that shows us these differences, and it's very robust. I'm really anal about numbers and data and stuff, so I'm really happy that there's proper studies around this. And there's a fantastic book that references some of these studies if you did want a deeper dive. It's called Inside Her Pretty Little Head. And it's a really fantastic book about marketing to women. So what's really interesting is if you look at the left-hand statement and the right-hand there, they're very, very different and opposing. So controlling the system for masculine versus connecting with empathy for the feminine. Left brain dominance versus whole brain. What is, like what's the here and now versus what could be with a bit of future focused. The masculine's very linear, argument driven, not arguing, but critical thinking. The explicit, obvious, versus feelings, meaning, and the implied. There's masculine has a lot of self-belief, and the female are more sort of devil's advocate. Masculine scale and competition versus the feminine safety and risk reduction. And then the masculine fight or flight, and then the the feminine response would be tend and befriend. So you can see how different they are, and for trying to put your communication hat on to connect with one of the opposite of those, it's quite challenging. So I feel like the exciting thing is there is a solution, so I'll show you that shortly. But I thought it's quite useful to see here what masculine themes look like. And I've got a worksheet that Robert's got that can be distributed later, and it has on the left-hand side a bunch of, I've probably got it here somewhere, I was just looking, left-hand side it'll have all the masculine cues and what that looks like. On the right-hand side, a whole lot of feminine cues, and in the middle, what gender neutral looks like, that enables you to capture both audiences together without polarizing one or the other. So that will be, available to you. I just also want to say there are times when you do want to definitely market to a masculine audience, and that's perfectly fine. And to do marketing to a feminine audience, that's perfectly fine too. So if you're going to do it, you may as well do it properly and go hard at it. But I will talk more shortly about how to know when you have one or the other audience, or whether it's actually should be a gender neutral audience. So I'll just play this ad to you that I feel demonstrates, like when you look at this checklist, every single thing down that list is captured in this spot here.
You never lived this day before, and you never will again. Realize timing is key. My father once said, it doesn't matter what you do in life, just be the best at it. Have a clear vision. Always keep moving. And don't ever be afraid of hard work. And one more thing. Success isn't handed to us. It's earned.
So I specifically picked ads I actually think were well done, right? So it's a good ad, but and specifically this is targeting 100% in the masculine. So it's got exaggerated voice production. It's very aggrandized concepts and claims. It's very high production imagery. It's like the brand is at the center of its own making. There's an air of stamp of authority coming out of it. It's very impressive, about impressing another, selling, pushing. It's more machine oriented than people oriented. It's even got the stirring soundtrack and the big crescendo at the end. So the interesting thing is there are a lot of us women that have quite a masculine side that'll go, oh yeah, I related to that. So at first I went, oh yeah, I don't mind that. But the challenge is that if you put this in perspective of the DISC personality profiling, the masculine female would be very D for dominant. And so there's only about 12% of the population that is like that. I happen to have quite a bit of D in me as well. So I think when you're a person who looks at that and go, I don't mind that, that's all right. The issue is it isn't actually relating to the wider audience. And the interesting thing is that BMW has deviated away from this strategy now, and I'll show you some other work later on. So totally on the masculine side, women typically would see this as boastful, big-headed, and being full of yourself. I don't know if they're just Australian expressions, but I'm sure you get what I mean. So if you look at what social media posting might look like in a masculine way, you can see here for Holden Australia, which is General Motors, there's like not a person to be seen for a start. It's all very much metal, and in aggressive camera angles, you can see cars even lurching as if in a speed situation. On the right, which is very unusual for Audi, I have to say. They're normally really quite inclusive, but in this instance, their feed is just absolutely full of sheet metal graphic images, dark colours, exaggerated angles and high performance. I would say that that would polarize a lot of women. In this particular car, maybe they've just decided that, you know, only men are going to drive this sports car. I mean, I disagree, but anyway, that's a decision that's been made. So if you then, by contrast, let's have a look at feminine themes in action.
Honey, you don't have to worry. Everyone's a little bit nervous on the first day of school.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you do. You can decide.
So I can decide.
Yeah. You're in control. Imagine that. Go on. Imagine it.
Maybe I can make some new friends.
Okay. And what are their names?
Kelly and Melly. I'm going to spend every lunchtime with them for the next 100 years.
Really? 100 years is a long time.
Well, at least as long as we can then. It will be hard, but we promise to call each other.
And then?
Then I'll study hard and focus on school.
Okay. Then what happens?
Then we'll travel the world. Do you want to come with me, Mum?
Oh, I don't think you'll be alone. I'm sure you'll meet something else along the way.
What do you mean?
Nothing. Carry on.
Then I'll get a job.
Cool. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Then I'll meet someone.
Okay. You're late.
I'm sorry. I want a house.
Of course.
Like the one we have.
Yeah.
And my own family. And my daughter.
That sounds good. And then what?
And I can sing.
Well, that sounds like a good plan. Don't you think?
Yeah. Let's see what happens.
So I still find that like an absolutely beautiful execution, gorgeous. But in terms of feminine themes, it's quite conversational language. It's quite a lot of humility about it. It's about tending and befriending. It's believing in the people rather than the machine. It's even though you know, it's all about the people, and there was like a car demonstration with the braking. It's still all centered around people. It's very cooperative, co-created. They're creating the story together. The nurture and protect. It's all about risk protection, talking a whole safety story. feminine would be talking in metaphor and a narrative, little bits of humor along the way. There were these cute little moments, and the, you know, mum joke of mum suggesting that you might have little flings with other men and not just you have a husband straight away, and then the girl going, what do you mean? You know, so nice little touch there with humor. And seeing the whole picture is, you know, a very feminine thing. Optimistic, enthusiastic, and non-linear. So the story was multi-layered, as you could see, and it had, you know, quite a future-focused story as well, and very consultative. So totally lots of feminine themes. There is just one interesting thing to say. So unconscious bias has actually come out in this spot slightly too, that isn't obvious. So beautiful story, very feminine, lovely. At the same time, they're depicting a family with, well, we don't know in this one whether there's a father or not, so that's one good thing, I guess. But you suggest, it's the suggestion that the young children and heterosexual mum and dad couple is the typical family. So the truth is it actually isn't anymore. And in Australia, I've done an assessment of the data, and it comes out to about 16% of families have two parents with young children. So it's actually a minority now. So as marketers, if we depict a typical family now, I think we're actually strategically misaligned with the real world out there. There's a great campaign for Volvo that they did do really well, and they started the ad with a graphic in the first minute that said 65, I think it is, % of UK families are non-traditional. So they kind of have gone in this one a little bit traditional, but all the same, it's still a good ad, and it is really showing the female audience. Because the female audience is currently the major buyer, it's a sound idea. But I do think it'd be really nice if we could be a bit more inclusive all the same and stop perpetuating this oversteer with too many females taking charge of these decisions when it could be evened out. So the interesting thing is when we're trying to fix this issue in the outside world is we get a bit activist. And so there's lots of women, you know, rah, 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 we got to stop this, fix this, you know, all that kind of thing. And I saw this data recently from, it's Canberra University here did a paper on it, but it's definitely from wider studies in the US as well. And it's, and some attribute Trump's success to this issue. So I don't know if I'm rattling anyone's cage there, but what the concept is that because of this activism potentially, and they're working out the cause, in 1992 there was a certain percentage of people believed that the woman's job was at home and the man's job was to be the breadwinner and to be in charge of the whole family. In 2017, I think it was, there's 16% more people think that than back then. I just went, are you for real? All this work everyone's doing and we're getting this backlash? It's just like impossible. So I'm actually wondering if it's this transition stance that's a problem. So I'll play you something. It's a great ad and it was doing a good thing. And then after this, I'll also show you another alternative rather than this rah-rah. So let's have a look. It's beautiful though.
Mom, I want this one. But honey, these don't belong together.
What if we change the game this Christmas?
So I still love that. It's like a fantastic execution. It's gorgeous. And I would say it's very obviously, you know, pro-feminine females. And it's also a bit of a nod to the gay community as well. Not, you know, making judgment about the little boy there, but there's a whole lot of little cues in there, like the little pony, which is a gay icon. And just, I would say they're trying to be supportive of the gay and the female audience there. But at the same time, it potentially has polarized some of the male audience as well. So I'm going, so how do you get these two worlds to combine? So we've talked about the differences in masculine there and feminine. You'll have this on your worksheets available to you. But what does gender neutral look like in the middle, so you can actually communicate with both without polarizing either? So this is the Ready Reckoner. This is like the checklist of how to move forward. And I think this is every way in life, not just for marketing, but it's a really fantastic demonstration. So where we talked about the belief in the machine on for the masculine and the people for the feminine, it's the mind in the machine is the sweet spot for both. And I'll show example of this as well. So rather than being self-centered or even being only about others, make it all about us. So instead of talking about improving the formula or making the machine better, or in the other side, reading the audience and being about the people, how can you get those two sides to work together? Make people-sized innovation. So have a purpose behind the innovation as well. Self-belief, the expert or the girlfriend, where's the sweet spot there? And it's about being the coach. So people like you, Robert, you're in the right place. Argument and linearity, the sort of impressing side versus mirroring, trying to fit in with everyone. Then the sweet spot is connecting. Independence and hierarchy versus cooperation and shared interests. How do you make that work for both? It's us and co-creation. So this is not something that someone just made up and said, oh, this would be nice, wouldn't it? But it's actually based on a whole lot of social studies. So it's actually a really fantastic proven model. This is what you'll get, this checklist that shows the two sides of things. So that is available. And so now that we know what gender neutral looks like, I'm going to play you an ad that I just went, oh my goodness, I've found one, you know, because it's actually really hard to find, believe it or not. So when you look at this ad, I do want to say that the art direction in this is very specific, I'd say, to an Asian audience. So in Australia, certain things, you know, are what's cool and great here right now, and you'll have the same in the US as well. But the concept is right, and the balance of the whole gender neutral thing is fantastic. So if you just put a little bit of the styling out of your mind, have a look at this.
Hey, BMW, where can I park?
So it's really fantastic demonstration of this, I think. So when I'm saying the mind in the machine, for example, at the end it says, don't let the machine drive you, you drive it. So that's about, you know, giving some humanity into the machine. It's got both systematic, you know, machiney type things and empathy for people covered off. There's a real sense of a community and a whole lot of us there, the way they're in streets, you know, with all the other people interacting with them. So one other thing I think is really interesting is that they also had, you know, the technology had a purpose. For example, it's like asking for directions that were very useful for people and not just about for the sake of the technology alone. And they also weren't tempted to have the woman ask directions because that would be the stereotype that women can't navigate. So I thought they handled that very respectfully. The other thing that you may not have even picked up, but they actually really subconsciously switched drivers. So the woman and the man both drove across through the whole ad. They switched it. And when you see like the woman pulled the guy and the guy pulled the woman, they actually took turns at leading each other, and it gave a very balanced view overall. It was quite human and real. Even the casting of the people in the street scenes, some of their gender was a little ambiguous, so you might not know, but they didn't make a big deal of it as well. It was just very invisible, so it was absolutely perfect. Even neutral colours and realistic imagery and uplifting music, that was all ticking every box for me. So I just love it. So if we were to look at what it might look like in social media, here's Volvo. I think they've really evolved now and doing some really nice work. So here you see there's a really great balance of, you know, how people might actually use the vehicle in real life, not just, you know, for the sake of the sort of performance story that's a bit outdated now and very masculine. Even the casting here, you really don't 100% know, you know, what someone's gender would be. So it gives you that freedom that it could be anything. And yeah, there's just a really nice touch of people in there. I would probably say they've gone a bit the other way because I've only got women. I wouldn't mind if there was just a, you know, a little bit more of a balance of male and female, but even still, of all the car manufacturers, when I'm looking at their Instagram pages, you know, it was a bit of a standout. So the issue is with a lot of marketing, like people think it's the marketing that's the problem, but often it's actually deeper than that. So if you look back at the gaming industry, you know, years back, everyone would have said that the gaming industry is boys only, are the only ones that buy games. So this is all our sales show us that men and boys buy these, so that we don't have a female market. So the problem with that is that you only are getting male sales because the product looks like this, the marketing looks like it does, that goes with it, the marketing channels where you're putting it is only for men, and all of the research that you're doing to see whether guys love these games or not, or what type of games they want, it's self-perpetuating. So what happened with Nintendo what they did is they went, okay, so past sales are telling us one thing, but what if there's a unconscious bias through all of that? What if we opened up and went, what would the whole market want from gaming? And then they redefined the entire gaming industry because they actually worked out what everyone wanted. And then the Wii was invented, and it was more successful in gaming than they've ever had before. So they let go of the sales data is telling us things. So when they worked out what their potential market was, that's when the success came. So that's what I really stand for. So when I talk about this, some people go, oh, but those are really expensive and, you know, they're big brand, big budget stuff. You know, I've only got a little budget and what could I possibly do? So and some businesses are like the most masculine historically, and how can they like move into this new phase? So I'll very quickly just step over a few things now so we don't run out of time. But South 32 is an Australian mining company in Perth, Australia. And I'm looking at their social media, and this is LinkedIn. They have 63,000 plus followers. And I'm going, that's massive for this channel. What are they doing? So I dug into it a bit, and I've got some good examples. So, you know, I talk about the mind in the machine. So if you look here, how South 32 are mining with principles, even though there's no machine literally there, right? But the dirt, normally a mining company, you see what they do is they have trucks digging the dirt and look at us, we're improving the fiscal economy. Whereas here they've actually said we're mining with principles. So there's the values and the mind is in the machine. And I thought that was a perfect example. Then when you look at what else they're doing, it's all very much the collective, look what we are doing together. They're showing all of their people and showing how diverse they are. What they're also doing nicely is, if you look at the top right image, they've got women represented there, but it's not tokenistic and overdone. That's actually quite a realistic balance, but it's showing potential and it's showing other women that there's a place for them as well. So I thought that was a really nice touch without overdoing it. And if you look at the bottom right, the logo there, the logo itself could be considered a masculine device. However, even the color is quite inclusive. And then to put the little flourish on the top as the Christmas concept, they've really put that mind in the machine and made it a sense of humanity, therefore reaching everybody. So I thought you can, even if you can't put people into these imagery, then there's little things you can do very easily to put humanity and make it gender neutral very, very simply. If we look at the New South Wales Police Force here in Australia, they're like the most serious, grown-up, important brand that needs to look professional no matter what. Yet they, in social media, is an appropriate place to just loosen up a little bit. But they've very nicely brought humanity and appeal to both genders really, really nicely. And it never hurts, even if you can't have people. There's, you know, everyone loves a dog. So that's a really sweet way for them to have, made that appeal across all ages, all genders. It's just lovely. In the past, you might have seen them with graduation films. You'd see people marching everywhere and all in perfect precision, because you can't be vulnerable or you can't be real people out in the world. And what they've done is, at the end of the police academy, what's the word, when they get inducted into the police force, everyone throws their hat in the air. It's a bit of a standard tradition, but it used to be done very privately. You couldn't possibly share that with the public because, you know, it wouldn't make us professional. But that humanity and warmth is now making them more accepted and approachable. So in the old days, you might have gone as a parent to your kids, and I did it myself, go, watch out, the police, they're going to put you in jail. And whereas these days you'd actually say, now there's a policeman, so if you're ever in trouble, that's who's going to help you. So they've really maintained professionalism, but still been able to appeal to all types, all people. So it's really fabulous. And we go, okay, so I'm going, who else is really boring and who falls into this category of needing to be so masculine to be professional and serious? who else is, and I'm going, banks and finance companies could not be more of a challenge, and always typically fell into masculine communication. So Commonwealth Bank here is one of the big four, and it's just full of warmth and people. I mean, almost to the point where you'd say, I don't really know what they stand for as a brand, but I think they're better off, doing this at the moment. It's a really good strategy. And PayPal here used to be so dull and looking very boring interface and all of that, but it's become a very inclusive, very approachable brand now without losing any professional credibility. And you can see even in the colours that they've chosen, they're not like all blue and all pink kind of thing trying to polarize. It's quite an inclusive palette, and they've got warmth with even little illustrations, and it's telling the story about the brand as well. And a real hand. It's actually ambiguous even what hand that is actually. So there's some things that they've done really well, I think. And if you look here, okay, so we can't have people, we can't have graphic treatment. How else can you put a feeling of humanity or put this mind in the machine? So if you look at that, it could have just been a streetscape with the house, just a boring old house. But what they've done is put some warmth into it. So they've made it look inviting. The light is leading into the house. It makes you want to be in there. The warm light coming out of the house and the whole colour grading of the imagery is really inclusive and makes you, feel quite warm. So it's actually doing a really great job at appealing to both genders. Then I'm going, okay, so like the army, they're so serious grown up. What are they doing that's actually making this work? I love this campaign. This is for recruitment for the Australian Defence Force. In the past, they would have had people in their best dressed uniform, all standing up, so serious and grown up, and I can't have a moment of fragility or vulnerability. So even the fact that they've got the woman on the left, one, a woman in the shot, two, she's wearing her, I guess they call the casual clothes. Her stance is very open. They used to be hands straight down or saluting and all that kind of stuff, which is heavy masculine. So this is so appealing. And I also think you can do it in terms of typography as well. So see how the do, what and love are in quite a solid masculine face, but the you is very friendly and warm and in a feminine face. So the two together gives it a really lovely touch. Even on the right, the guy here, his pose is very open and welcoming, but in both cases, they're still professional. You don't lose any professionalism by adding this sense of humanity into it. And you can see also the talking marks around just talking about it makes my heart race. So it's actually put a person into this, kind of boring world. And on the right, you actually have a sense of who he is as a person and why he's doing what he's doing. And that sort of split screen concept of the man in uniform and then the other part of his life, it's a really beautiful way of like putting the man in the machine and balancing the genders there, the gender themes. So then I'm going, okay, so if you can't have people and you can't have that, and what other challenge do we have? So I'm thinking about even Philadelphia, right? That's a really typically city council, seriously boring, seriously, trying to be sensible grown-ups. But look how cool this is. So with love, Philadelphia, it just makes you feel so connected with this city, and it's given such a sense of personality. They would have typically have been, sensible, grown-up, serious logo, very masculine, and so it's really lightened up. And then I'm going, even in your community management in social media, you can bring a sense of humanity and this a sense of inclusion as well. In the past, in public, these brands would have been all very dry and left brain and, so you've got a problem, let's get in touch offline and we'll sort it for you. Whereas, and I must admit, I did a little bit of a social media rant because I had very bad customer service experience. But then when the way they handled this online by being a very real person, see, he's even written his name. So it's not just representing the company as this big almighty force. It's actually, I'm an individual within the company, and he's signed his name. And so it becomes that balance of the two worlds really, really nicely managed. And over here on the left, the B&T one, what happened there was B&T had it's a magazine here, and one of the leading marketing magazines, and they had a problem with their website and you couldn't email them. So I sent them a message on social media, but instead of it being ignored completely, they actually responded. But even look at that. Thanks for letting us know, exclamation mark. It's very human and very warm, and, you know, they will get onto it. And they did. Well, I don't know if they did, but anyway, it seems like they did. So I feel like that's very, really lovely done. So we shouldn't be afraid to be real and warm on our communications. You don't lose your credibility. So this is the next important topic. So if you're out there in the world and you're wanting to make sure that you're appealing to both genders, all genders, sorry, I actually think that this is a really fantastic report, and I'm pretty certain it's available globally, but if anyone wants it, I'll direct you to it. So it's called the Edelman Trust Barometer. It's a global survey of what people want from companies. And basically at the moment, this tells us what themes that the world wants, and that's all genders want. So we want to know what the societal impact is. We want to know what values a company has. We want to know about the future. What's your vision for the future? What's your purpose? Like, why are you even in business? And also the operational decisions that impact me. I want to know about them with transparency. So I'm going, that's like a perfect example of what a conscious capitalist is for a start. And at the same time, this is what people want from brands. So that made me think, when I look back to this South 32, that's why this is even more powerful than I thought, because they're covering off every one of those 5 content themes, making every person going, that's what I want to hear from this brand. And they're really engaged with them. So I think this, you know, impacts all of our business decisions. So I also went, okay, so what's the most boring customer-facing experience you can possibly imagine? And then how do we put this sense of humanity into it? And how do we keep it gender neutral? At the same time, still being professional. So I found this. So normally, you know, it's like, you know, only one or the other bathroom. And so it's a bit of a pet topic of mine anyway. But even the illustration, look at that. It's like quite an inviting toilet, wouldn't you say? And saying it's for everyone, very inclusive. So I'm being a bit cheeky, but I actually think that, is something that would be quite good to do. So just to wrap up here, I've got 10 quick tips to keep humanity in your social media activity. One is be this gender neutral when it's appropriate. So do your research and find out for sure that what your potential market is versus your past sales. So let's let go of past sales as an indicator. Care like people are in front of you. So talk like a real person. And it goes in line with the third one, which is be okay to be vulnerable. Just be a real person. Number 4, don't let the brand damaging negative comments win. So a lot of times in social media, people, if they're bagging you publicly, people say, just ignore it and, you know, pretend it didn't happen. I really object to that, because saying nothing actually condones it. So respond in a professional way. There's a whole topic on that. And also bring offline communication back online. So if someone's making a fuss about you out in social media, then often people direct them offline to resolve it, but they don't come back and say, thanks very much for resolving this, or glad we worked that out, or whatever it is. Definitely come back and show people that it's been resolved. Stand for something, please. So I stand for this, as you can tell, I think, but also make sure it's something people want. So that Edelman Trust Barometer, that's what people want. And also just a quick bit of advice is just to stick to the same content themes. So because I've had such a diverse lot of experience in marketing, one of the problems I found originally was if I talk about everything, no one knows what I really stand for. But when I went, okay, I'm just so busy and I've got so much to do, how about I just talk about these three things? And when I did that and under one purpose-driven umbrella, then it all went like really super well, and it's now a proven theme with lots of other clients, and there are other people who validate this in content marketing strategies as well. And then I'm saying, yes, show diverse people. And what does that look like? Because I think in Australia, a lot of the government ads, they're actually overcompensating. So they're trying to put lots and lots of diverse people in, and in particular in Australia, they're showing a lot of Muslims. And then what happens is there's a report that's come back saying most Australians believe that there's 12% of the population are Muslim, when the truth is there's actually only 2.4%. So what we're doing is we're overrepresenting them in our media, trying to make sure we're looking politically correct. So just go to your, well, it's probably ABS, the American Bureau of Statistics. Just make sure you're reflecting what the true numbers are. And then I'm saying mix of fonts and visual treatments, so that gets that balance. And then the last tip, give, sell. So yeah, you don't sell every time. That's a very masculine behavior. It's look at me, look at me, look at me, buy this, buy it now. So actually be helpful, be useful, be informative 3 times to everyone. And I've actually sent that checklist to you all, but if you, this is very long, so I'll leave it there, but yeah, you can find that gender neutral checklist. So that's, yeah, all I had to share. I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions that you want me to cover off. I can.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can go. We're going to make that. We're going to make the link to the worksheet available with the recording too. So even if people are on live, they'll have the opportunity to go to where the recording is posted. They'll get an email. They'll see a distribution that will give them access to that as well.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
So wow, there's so much there, and it's funny because because I think it's my screen that's actually like capturing the video recording. I didn't want to go off screen and go into the chat, but I get a little bubble that comes up as people are engaging in the chat window here. And there was like a constant like conversation going on based on what you were sharing. And so I think we do very likely have some questions here that people would like to ask. And we're going to go, I'm going to switch it over so we're just in the normal, like, I call it the Hollywood Squares mode, where for those of us who are a little older know, you can kind of see everyone's picture. But if people, you should be able to unmute yourself, or if you just raise your hand either by clicking on the raise hand button or by doing it old school and just waving your hand in the video picture, we can call on a few people and hear some of the questions that are out there.
Awesome. Thanks for the lovely feedback and some good suggestions, because I collect this material, so I'm going to go and have a good dig into some of those tips. So thank you for that.
Yeah, one of the great things about Zoom is that it when we capture the recording, we get an audio recording, a video recording, and we get the chat. So so I'll be able to send you that as well. So any questions? We have some engaged looking faces out there. What questions do we have? Or comments even?
So it's Johanna.
Hi, Johanna.
If I may go first, I have a sort of a two-pronged question. One is, what countries are doing this neutral kind of advertising in the best way, and what companies can we look to as the best role models?
Countries, I must say, I've really had to hunt hard to find it. And the ad that I showed you with the, I think it was a BMW or the Audi, I can't remember now, with the dancing, that's an Asian one. And what I don't know is if it was a fluke, to be honest. So I think that, you know, that given the research and the data, I think the UK has the most robust evidence that this is a strategy that is really the most powerful for business. But I don't know that I've actually seen a lot of the creative work reflect that. I think, yeah, Volvo's done some nice things lately that I would say is breaking the rules about family in particular and this area. I do think there's lots of ads globally that are doing a good job, but I think it's unconscious. So it's unconscious bias, but in a good way. Do you know what I mean? Someone sort of,
Yeah. We'll take it though.
falling into it, right? Yeah. And there was a second part to your question. Which countries? I definitely think the UK, but I happen to find stuff in Asia and
which companies?
Oh, companies. Yes. So I think I would say if I had to pick a company that's leading the way at the moment, I would say Unilever across the board. Their brands are very diverse, but I think are doing a really good job at being very conscious about what they're doing. They're very purpose driven in every way. And, I think as far as the conscious capitalist as well, I think they're living and breathing that in every way.
They are, and I think if they're not a B Corp themselves, they've been on a buying spree acquiring B Corps.
That's a good point. Yeah, so maybe that's how they're getting to B Corp. I think there might be a B Corp now as the whole.
I think they are. I believe they are, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think so. So great, and their creative work that's coming out at the back of it, I'm just like, I've got envy, I have to say.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or anything people would like to share from what Anne has presented to us?
Praveen, were you putting your hand up before?
I actually had my hand up, Anne. It was Tom Henry.
Oh, Tom, it was you. The screen's moved. Yeah.
Yes, I was. Yeah. We moved the Brady Bunch around, so inclusive now. But first of all, I wanted to thank you for a lovely presentation.
Pleasure.
This with no expectations. I didn't know what I was going to see. I really enjoyed, particularly, I should have realized you're a marketer. You're going to show us some great images, and it was just, and then the depth behind it. But one of the things I wanted to first mention and also ask you about is I love this concept about overcompensating.
Yeah.
Really, for the culture that you're in, so that, because the Australian culture and the American culture right now are so very different in terms of even marketing, and I've worked in retail for a long, long time, and I've seen it evolve over the years. But here's the thing I wanted to ask you about. It's that idea that literally about 10, 20 years ago, as we in business started looking at this, we started looking at the goal here being that if people notice the diversity in an overt way, you're usually overcompensating. But if they just see an inclusive image of the way the best, an opportunity to see what an inclusive environment looks like, they don't really notice the diversity at that point. It just looks to them like an inclusive environment.
I love your point there.
About that.
I feel like, the true integration and, true diversity and inclusion is actually invisible. So it's not rah-rah, whatever. It's just is. And no one has to even think about it. That is what I'm dreaming of a day. And actually coming back to Johanna's point, another brand, I'm not sure if it's here in the US as well. Oh, I've just lost the name of it. Oh my God. It's a fashion brand. Oh no, I just had it. Anyway, so what's happened is, the point is important, is that they've just made this work, and they have women and people on catwalks, and they've just made the work and put it up, and everyone's just sort of accepting it. No one's really gone and said, oh, they're doing diversity, and they're doing everyone body image and all that sort of thing. It just is. And iconic, that's it, the iconic, a fashion shopping hub and digital experience, and they just did this stuff. No one went and said, hey everybody, look what we're doing. And it was just so beautifully done, because it was just is. And it was exactly your point, Tom. I think that's what I'm dreaming of, a day where we just automatically just do it.
Beautiful. That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Anyone else with a question or comment or something you'd like to share? Kate?
Thank you, Kate.
I really enjoyed this on so many levels, just so many levels. So much. You were right on, Robert. I will be your new best friend, Anne, if you're looking.
Yeah, we're connecting. Thanks,
Send
Kate.
my application in for that.
I can go on forever. I can promise you. There's, you know, look how many topics I care about. And anyways,
do you find, as you're communicating with companies about this, when I'm working with people who identify in that gender neutral, and I'm also the mom of a transgender daughter, so my video team, all of the people that we're talking to, it's a microaggression to continue to use the language of even identifying as masculine and feminine. So even as we're working on projects, and one way they described it to me was just, if you could, like, just being more detailed, it's like we're letting ourselves off the hook to not be specific, whether it's, so describing branding, like increasing our ability to even identify what those brand elements are without using the phrases masculine and feminine. And then
I know. Yeah.
To do that. We actually have to be more specific, even in languaging it as conscious businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I got called on that the other day of like, how else would you describe this? And I realized how limited my own, just because that's my own training, it was so labeled in the binary. I have to learn new terms and be more specific to be able to describe in a non-gender way, even working with clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm really hoping this checklist is a good place to start with that, because you've got new language. That's part of why I wanted to dig it together. So you can't get it written. I don't think that, but you can't get all of this in any of the books. I've done my own sort of collation of other people's content, which I've credited everywhere. But I think you're on a really important thing. For me, the dream is that my conversation becomes irrelevant as well, because, and especially with demographic profiling, I just am anti-demographic profiling. So for those of you that don't know quite the exact words of that, so what happens is when we're in marketing, typically people say, I want to profile so let's say I want to profile for a travel industry. I'm going to market to a woman who's 30 to 40 years old. She earns $100,000. She works in a white collar job, and she lives in the inner suburbs. That is a normal way that a marketer would approach their audience. The issue for me is, and I've got a fantastic case study from Australian tourism around this. That woman, there's two of those, right? So one of them, all the same demographic profile, all those things I just spoke about. The one on the left, your right, she would, she's a really avid traveller every year and would be really interested in any ads that were presented to her. The other woman on the other side, same demographic profile, has absolutely no interest in travelling and wants to stay home and fluff her cushions up and make her house perfect instead. So she puts her money there. So if you put your money out there and your creative assets, which cost a lot to produce, you're wasting so much of your budget as far as I'm concerned, and you're polarizing an entire audience that actually could be available to you. So the alternative is to market to attitudinal concepts. And so if you say, okay, I'm going to market to anybody in the travel industry who's interested in, let's say, adventure travel. So traveling to Australia is considered an adventure country, like you might to Africa or something like that, mainly because we have animals that everywhere that could kill you, everywhere you step, right? So it's considered adventure. So when they did that, they went down this little groove down the industry, and it was like such a huge success. They were 3 times more successful, 300% more success in sales than I've ever had before, and so incredibly successful. And so that was, from anyone from 90 years old to 10 years old who was interested in adventure travel, considered Australia as a destination when they didn't before. Mainly because the marketers went, oh, our sales results show us that, we've been selling to 30-year-old women before, and therefore we'll keep doing the same as we've always done. But they put it aside and worked out who's our potential audience, and they targeted it by attitude. was so good. So yeah, I'm saying, yeah, you're right. We've got to get rid of the language. You've got to get rid of how we think about customers and actually, yeah, target all people based on what they care about. And I think that's what's good about conscious capitalism, because, you know, our objectives and vision and, you know, what we're here for is actually universal. So, and that's another whole story, because in Australia we've done some segmentation here, and we're not going how you would normally do profiling by, we want to reach businesses of this scale and, you know, this area or whatever. We're saying we want people who are, the attitude is on the levels of consciousness. They've gone from being an entrepreneur and feel there's no meaning in that anymore, and there's something else. That gap in attitude, that's where we're targeting in Australia. And we're about to relaunch here, so I'm sort of quite excited. But I think that's a perfect example of don't do the normal demographics. Saying, oh yeah, we're targeting men that, you know, who are CEOs of jobs in, you know, whatever industry. So it's I think the way of the future.
Awesome. So for those who are still on the live call, we were able to rustle up the link to that worksheet that we've been talking about. There is a link to it now in the chat box. And for anyone listening to the recording, you know, you should have been given access to that as well. And if you haven't been, then reach out to us and we'll get it to you. But we did finally rustle that up. So
I was talking too much. Sorry, I didn't get a chance.
No. That's in the excitement of preparation, that piece got missed, but that's called life. Anyone else who's still on the live call who has a question or something you'd like to share?
Okay, can you hear me? I want to say thank you. It was a great presentation. I did some work last year, actually it was a year before, on analysis of reports for a couple of financial advisors. So it was looking at companies, and I'm glad you mentioned language, because the language as well as the images that they're portraying are really important. It's really important to make sure it's inclusive of males and females, because a lot of companies say, oh, you know, we've got a couple of women on board, and we've got 3 women on board. And then when you look at their marketing material and their annual report and whatever, you discover that it ain't like that at all in reality. And I followed up with a lot more analysis and interviews, but I'm glad you coupled language as well as image, because
for sure. There's a really fantastic tool. I'm not sure if you've seen, I'll put it in the chat box as well, but it's actually a gender neutral copy checker. So even if you're doing a HR, I've just quickly Googled it invisibly, so there it is in the chat box. Even if you're doing a job description, you're writing an ad for a job, you're sending someone an email, you're doing anything, any communication at all, if you use this gender checker tool, you can actually tell if you've got language that's binary, and it shows you alternatives as well.
That's great. Thank you.
No worries.
Awesome. Anyone else? Last call?
Well, I'm really grateful to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. And,
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. What you shared was really compelling. I want to make sure everyone's aware, you know, Anne made it really clear when we were getting ready to do this. You know, we allocated about an hour and the opportunity to slip over that went into Q&A, but that she's taken a tremendous amount of content and just given us just a sliver. Again, was really compelling and really wonderful. But to me, what we've done here is really start a conversation. And I think that one of the things you and I share from our conversations is a desire to now keep that conversation going. So I thank you for the wonderful increased awareness that I now have from being here today, as I'm looking at the marketing messages that I'm literally surrounded with and bombarded by in my life, and I can really see them through a different kind of lens. And one of the words that really came to mind for me as I was listening to you today is influence. And these messages can be so influential. And if we looked at them through this more kind of higher level of awareness point of view, we're not as subject to just being blindly influenced by them. So I really, really appreciate having some new distinctions to look at all this messaging that we're bombarded with. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, from CCBA, and I do love the idea that, you know, we're going to share it here from the San Francisco Bay Area with our community and beyond. And if the same thing is going on in your community in Australia and beyond, then we really do have a wonderful opportunity to share this message and share this level of awareness on a much larger scale. So thank you for being the catalyst for that. And I certainly hope this is just the beginning of a conversation between you and your team and our team as well. And so we'll be talking more again soon. So thank you everyone who's on the live call. Also those of you who are joining us for the recording, for being a part of this. And we'll look forward to having you join us again. Again, this is a series of live or online events that we're hosting that are also recorded and archived. So we hope we'll see your beautiful face on one of these wonderfully diverse and non-binary online events that we have. I think as we look at the screen with all these beautiful faces, we see just exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about. So perfect example. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you on the next event. And thank you, Anne, for your compelling presentation.
Thank you, Anne.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Good night, all.